Grazie Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The fourth power, you said. Well, yes, I'm here to represent the journalists' views, but I'm not here to represent any political views per se. I think we need to return to the principle of subsidiarity, but it's a choice we need to make rather than opportunity, as we say here. We have the European Treaty from 2007, and we need to apply Article 5 of that so that it functions properly. Let me just remind you that on the European Parliament's website, which all citizens have access to, it is explained that the principle of subsidiarity seeks to make it possible to protect actions and capacity of member states and to give legitimacy to the EU's actions if objectives cannot be sufficiently pursued by member states, but because of the actions in question, they might be better pursued at European level. Now, the European Parliament then concludes by saying that, therefore, the exercise of any competence needs to be brought as closely to the citizen as possible. And that prompts three questions, in my view. First of all, is it fair to say today, in general terms, that the competences that Europe has are as close to its sister citizens? Second question, is it true to say that a rational balance has been found in this process where sovereignty at national level is done away with in favor of a supranational structure, and this in times of crisis? And people are no longer convinced that we need more Europe. People are wary of Europe now. And my third question then, can we say that we are now giving more space to religious and civic organizations, to families and to civil society, so that people can be active participants and shoulder their own responsibility in an open society which is complex, rather than having states run everything for them? Well, I don't think you can answer any of those questions in the affirmative. There seems to be discrepancy between the expectations of the citizens and the choices made by the institutions at EU level, in particular the Commission. And that, in my view, goes to show that the issue of competences hasn't been resolved and that the principle of subsidiarity is not being applied as it should be, but is being choked by this downward spiral. Let me explain. I don't think the instrument of subsidiarity is being used. The fragile European institutions, which lack authority, are imposing centralist solutions, top down, but then the responsibility is given to member states. And that is then the subject of criticism from national electorates who see Europe as a bureaucratic cage which doesn't manage to provide the right answers to important issues such as terrorism, unemployment, migration, and so on. Now, in June, we all know that the UK voted in Brexit, and that goes to show that a large country did not feel close to Europe and did not like the solutions which were being proffered by Europe. Its citizens said no, even though the polls indicated initially otherwise. Now, I would have hoped for a different outcome myself, but I think that the UK citizens had their reasons for voting no, and we can't sweep those reasons under the carpet. It wasn't just folly. Even the newspapers that came out in favor of the UK's presence in Europe after Brexit had to accept that the technocrats made mistakes and that the citizens were paying the brunt for that. There's an imperfect European currency, and The Economist goes on to say that that has led to stagnation, unemployment, and that is tearing Europe apart. Now, when it comes to Brexit, I don't like the way some of the aspects have been instrumentalized. and the fact that the UK is now heading for disaster. Often what you hear in Italy is that London is doomed, but I don't think that's true. I mean, the English not being part of the Eurozone, we're with one leg out of Europe anyway. I think it's Europe that needs to take the hit and accept defeat. And losing the UK is a major loss. So we'll lose that market. Now, what do you have in the big society in England if it's not the application of the principle of subsidiarity, something which is badly needed in Europe? But still, they bang on about more Europe, ignoring the true problems that Europe has. Europe has to be strengthened, it has to be more present in our lives. But I must say that, in my view, if you look at reality, we need a very different approach, the opposite approach, in fact. We need to lighten the competences that Europe has, do away with the red tape and bureaucracy, and make sure that national economic policies can flourish. And that way you avoid the erosion of the European institutions themselves. And you don't have this constant toing and throwing about budgetary austerity and flexibility and so on. But it will be an uphill struggle, and we need to face up to that. I think it's important to talk about the principle of subsidiarity again, to broach that topic. And it's one of the founding principles, and it's one which can bring about reform. And I think, as a journalist, I would very much welcome such an approach.